Hey everyone, you're here sewing with Cody, and in today's video we are going to start a series dealing with one of my favorite things, the Big Book of Feet. So Bernina has this big book of feet that goes over all of the 100 or so different feet and accessories that are available for all of our Bernina machines. One thing to always remember is just about every single foot that Bernina has is interchangeable with all of our current model machines. And when I mean current model, I mean the machines made within the last 20 or so years. So they're all interchangeable with the exception of a few. And if some of those few feet will be your D feet, so your feet that can accommodate that dual feed. Those types of feet can only be used on a dual feed machine. Another exception would be the BSR, the Bernina Stitch Regulator. That foot can only be used on a machine that's capable to accept the BSR. It has to have that technology that can read it and process that information that the BSR is putting into the machine. And the 570 is one of those machines. And this is the machine that we'll be working with on today's foot. And today's foot, I figured we just start from the very beginning. And that's exactly how I start my comprehensive feet classes that I teach in the store. I have all the machines set up, I have all the feet available, and we take them section by section. And we start from foot 1 and we go all the way up. So with foot 1, we'll start here. This foot comes with every machine. It's what I refer to it as your basic sewing foot. This is the foot you can use and sew just about anything. But Bernina refers to this foot as your reverse pattern foot number 1. So this foot is one of those feet that come in 3 different varieties, depending on what machine you're really working with. So this foot comes as a regular, just 5.5 millimeter number 1. It also comes as a number 1C. So remember, the C stands for the code, which allows for the 9 millimeter stitch width. And then it also comes in a number 1D. D standing for dual feed, that's 9 millimeters and accommodates that dual feed to basically pull all of your fabric. And that's the foot we'll be working with today, is the 1D. But you can do this, all the applications with any of the number 1 feet. So the first thing we're going to play with are twin needles. I get this question a lot, is how do I use a twin needle on a Bernina, or on any sewing machine really. So with the Bernina, it's very easy. So right here I've got a pack that has a twin needle in it. So this is a 2.5 millimeter needle width basically, and it's a size 80 needle. So the 80 stands for the type of needle that each one of these needles are. So the twin needle can be found in multiple different types. They can be found as jeans, stretch, embroidery points, and universal, as you see here. So you have different classes of needles which you use for different types of fabric, of course. So the twin needle goes in just like any other needle. So we'll take out our top stitch needle we have here, and then we'll put in our twin needle. So now it comes to the part of threading the machine. So I like to thread my left needle and then my right needle. It doesn't matter really what order you thread them in. So for my left needle, I'm going to use the green thread that I have on the horizontal spool pin. So I'm going to thread just like any other machine or any other thread. However, right when I get here to my tension disc, there's a thin little metal tension divider. You can see it moving around in there. And it's moving around because my foot's up. So here, this is the only real difference that we have to be concerned about when threading for a twin needle, is we want to make sure one thread is on the left side and the next thread is on the right side. So that divides the thread to make sure we get even tension. So since we're going to work with our left needle, we're going to put this on the left side. So there we go, got it on the left side. And then we'll just finish threading the machine. And remember, with twin needles, you cannot use your needle threader. So don't even try. So our next thread's coming from over on our spool stand, and it's going to be this coral thread. It's going to come to that little clip here. We're going to come back here, And I like to hold, when I'm threading my second thread, I like to hold both threads so one's not pulling and adding some excess slack in the machine. So here we're going to come on the right side of that little separator, and we're just going to thread it like normal. So now that we have both threads, or both each needle and our twin needle threaded, now we can start sewing. So what we're going to do here is the most important thing we need to do next is tell the machine the size twin needle we put on. So when we look at our pack, we're not worried about the 80, we're worried about the 2,5 or the 2.5. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell our Bernina, so right here, where it shows the 9mm, a stitch plate, and a needle, we're going to click that. And here we have options of all the different twin needles. So this is a 2.5, so we'll come here where it says 2.5, we'll click it. So what that does is it tells the machine what twin needle we have in there. So when we choose decorative stitches and different things, it will put restrictions in so it doesn't swing the needle bar too far over to the right or too far over to the left. So one thing we want to make sure is we want to pull up our bobbin thread. So whenever working with a twin needle, it is recommended that you leave a longer tail on our bobbin and we pull it up manually before we get started. So what we'll do is we'll just turn our hand wheel and pull that thread up. And there she is. And then it allows us to pull all of our threads underneath our foot. So right now I have a piece of stabilizer underneath our fabric. We're only working with one layer for this sample. And we're going to choose just a decorative stitch. You can choose just about anything. And with the restrictions set in, it will allow us to not break anything. So let's choose this fun wave stitch. And the question always is can I use my needle cutter? Yes, you can. So it cuts the threads beautifully. So we can see there's our stitch. So on the back, when using twin needles, because unlike a overlocker where we have an upper and a lower looper, here it creates a little zigzag because we don't have two bobbins, we only have one. But it gives you a really neat decorative stitch. So what also we can do with a twin needle is we can sew knits. So here I have a little hem, and so what this is going to do, it's going to give you a similar look to a cover stitch machine. So the sergers that can do a cover stitch, but it's just going to give you that look. It's not going to give you the full functionality of a cover stitch, and it's not going to look as pretty on the back because it's going to have that zigzag. But we can give it a try and see what it looks like. So when we're working with the knit, you want to make sure you reduce your pressure foot pressure. So we can reduce that by coming here. So we already have it kind of drop down a little bit. So it won't stretch our fabric. You can also increase that stitch length. So we have it increased a little bit. So let's see what we got. So here we have that nice pretty double stitching, and on the back this is what we get. It does allow for a little bit of stretch because it's kind of like a little zigzag on the back, but it does give you that professional look hem, and that's on our knit. And the only thing we changed here was we reduced the pressure foot pressure and we lengthened the stitch length a little bit. And the 2.5 twin needle worked beautifully, as you can see here. If you get too wide of a twin needle, especially on a stretchy fabric, it will kind of want to tunnel up, and the tension will kind of want to squeeze it in a little bit. You can make some adjustments to help alleviate that, but it's just usually easier or better to stick with a smaller twin needle. The possibilities are endless when it comes to working with twin needles. You can really do some fun, fancy, decorative work. But let's move on to the next thing. So we'll take our twin needle off and move on. So the next thing we're going to work with using the number 1 foot is we're going to make some Entredeux using the wing needle. The wing needle is a very interesting looking needle, but it can give you some really, really neat looking effects. So here's our wing needle. So if we look at it, it looks like it's a little wing. If I can zoom in. So you can see here how it flares out on both sides. And that's designed so it can really kind of cut into our fabric and make holes into our fabric. There's really nothing special you have to do. You just put it in like any other needle. Don't use your needle threader with this one either, because you can break your needle threader because of the flare outs on both sides. So you have to thread that one by hand. And right now I'm using an 80 weight thread. So I'm using Wonderfill, but there are, Wonderfill's Deco Bob. But if you wanted to use a cotton thread, you can use a cotton 80 weight thread. I know Aurifil has one. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go to, on the 570, it's stitch 701, and this should be the same for many other stitches. So we can go up here, type in 701, and the check mark. So this stitch is found in our 700 folder, which is our heirloom stitches, and you can see it right there, right at the top. Now, because I've tested all these stitches out before and I know exactly what I'm looking for, we're going to make this stitch a little bit bigger than what the default is. So we're going to make it a 5.8 inch wide. And then let's make it about 5.4 long. So the result we're going to get is this. So it creates some pretty, very pretty Entredeux. And so here's our same white fabric, and we just have a little piece of stabilizer attached to the back. Because typically when you make an Entredeux, you only work with one layer of fabric, and typically it's a batiste. So in that case, you're going to want to, a lot of our heirloom sewers will heavily starch their batiste, or they'll use a lightweight tear-away stabilizer, something that tears off really easy. I've even seen people use a wash-away stabilizer. That really depends, it's personal preference, but you're going to need some form of stabilizer. So right now we have our wing needle in, and we make sure we tell it we have our wing needle selected, so it won't allow us to do anything that it can't do. We have our stitch width and our stitch length change, our needle threaded, and we're ready to go. So we'll just start it up. So let's see what we've got. So we can see here we have a beautiful Entredeux stitch. And so that wing needle is what creates all those holes. But also you have to make sure you're using a stitch that goes back into that same spot multiple times to really create that hole, to give you that really, really unique look. There's a lot of fun things you can do with the wing needles, including like pin stitching and creating your own Entredeux, of course. There's a huge list of other things we can work with when using the number 1 foot, because it is our universal everyday sewing foot. So say if you're hemming a pair of jeans, let's take this wing needle out, and let's put in what would be a jeans needle. So if you are working with denim, you're going to want to work with the jeans needle because it's a stronger, more robust needle, and it's nice and sharp. So it's going to penetrate through multiple layers of denim and not hesitate. So say we've got our jeans needle in, and so let's clear some of these settings. So let's make sure we tell it we have our regular straight needle in, just single needle. And let's just go back to actually we're going to go back to the triple stitch. So when we want to work with a heavyweight fabric, we're going to work with something that's going to be really tight. There's going to be a lot of tension against it or pulling upon that seam. We have the option of a triple stitch, which on this machine is stitch number 6. It looks like a regular straight stitch, but if we look closer, it's bold. So stitch number 6 is bold opposed to stitch number 1. That means it's a triple stitch. So the way that works is, so let's just say if we're working with denim fabric, we have a jeans needle in, but we don't have thick thick thread. So we can use just like a regular weight 50 weight cotton thread, but instead of stitching it over it multiple times, we can do a triple stitch. So the triple stitch, all you have to do really is just stitch like normal. You want to go a little bit slower because the feed dogs do go back and forth. So it stitches over it 3 times essentially, but it gives you a nice, bold, strong stitch. So we can see here we have a nice, thick triple stitch. So this is going to be really secure, but what's nice is if you did have to stitch over it multiple times without using a stitch, your stitch wouldn't be this pretty and this straight because it would be kind of wobbly over the previous stitches. But stitch number 6 is a great triple stitch, a great stitch that will give you a lot of strength. But also we've got one more triple stitch. It's our triple zigzag. So we can do the same thing if we needed to have a strong, secure stitch, like if you were stitching like webbing or something on something. The triple zigzag works just like a triple straight stitch. And of course we can make it narrower or longer. But here we don't have to worry about finding and using a thicker thread. So one more thing that we use the number 1 foot for that's different than just regular sewing, and that's hand look quilting stitches. However, that one's a little more involved, so I'm going to save a separate video for that. So that really concludes the number 1 foot. This is just some of the different things that you want to consider when you are sewing that you should be using your number 1 foot, but there's so many different feet when it comes to Bernina feet and accessories that there are other options, and there are tons of things you can do. The number 1 foot is probably the least exciting of all the feet because it can do everything. The more specialty feet that will be coming up are a little more exciting because they're designed to do really specific things and they do them so well. But not every foot is as exciting as some of the other ones. But I want to cover them all so you have an idea of what's out there, and especially the number 1 comes with all of the machines. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. As always, happy sewing!